penned 229 years ago.
Do you believe that the Constitution of the United States is law?
It's playing into a modern-day battle in the West.
You're in martial law. You've been in martial law.
Think of the movement as a mindset. Groups and individuals who come running when they hear the federal government is violating someone's rights. And lately the focus is public lands and a theory that Article 1 of the Constitution does not allow the federal government to control the millions of acres that it does. You're an honorary member of 6 militias.
Yeah.
That's quite a few.
Brand Thornton is proud of his 20 years in militias.
Do you enjoy the confrontation?
I do now.
2 years ago, he went to Bundy Ranch to stop a federal government roundup of Cliven Bundy's cattle. This year, he was with the Bundy brothers as an armed group occupied a federal wildlife refuge in Oregon.
Do you fear that the government's going to show up and arrest you?
Not really. Not really.
He was not one of the near 40 people arrested in the conflicts. With the Bundys charged, Thornton is considered one who can keep the movement moving forward.
Your corruption from top to bottom affects everybody in this country.
He spins his strict interpretation of the Constitution into online rants about government overreach.
It ain't your land. Get over it.
He's set his sights on the federal agency that manages 2/3 of the land in Utah, the Bureau of Land Management.
Leave. Leave before we make you leave.
I went to the trials in Oregon.
We're not here to overthrow government. That'll happen according to God's will.
Quit lying!
And we're planning on staying here for several years.
Thornton testified for the defendants, Ryan and Ammon Bundy,
And somebody's got to step up to the plate.
and Utah resident Shauna Cox.
This is so important that we have to stand.
Are you willing to go to prison for that?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
They see the armed takeover of the Oregon Wildlife Refuge as a peaceful protest for our rights.
There were people, armed guards, out in front of that refuge.
But it was
That's
really
been
hard.
established.
It was really hard to see those guns. I mean, you had to really look for them.
That's a recipe for anarchy.
U of U law professor and former judge Paul KSL.
But our country is premised on the idea that there is rule of law.
He says the movement's interpretation of the Constitution is not valid. Here's why. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 says the feds can purchase forts and arsenals and nothing about land. But the property clause gives Congress authority to govern federal lands.
By definition, the BLM and the FBI are illegal in the state of Utah.
The Supreme Court has ruled over and over in the government's favor, which makes the movement's argument.
It's a flat-out loser under current Supreme Court precedent.
And thanks to social media, they're excellent at spinning their story, rallying the masses, and tapping taxpayers. Nevada, they block a federal court order for rancher Cliven Bundy to turn over his cattle for not paying grazing fees for 20 years. They said they were protecting land rights, but no mention of piles of trespassing citations, public safety problems, and health threats, like the cow manure piling up around Lake Mead. In Oregon, they protest prison terms for 2 ranchers convicted of arson. But they don't say much about the illegal deer slaughter the fire covered up. The takeover cost taxpayers at least $8 million for law enforcement and probably more.
Endanger law enforcement officers.
Referring to it as extremism, Democratic lawmakers in D.C. convened a panel. The Southern Poverty Law Center says the movement is gaining momentum. For example, the number of anti-government groups in the U.S. has ballooned to 1,000. Intimidation and threats against federal employees who manage public lands are becoming potentially deadly. And the panel said Utah's congressional delegation isn't helping matters.
I'm not going to condone lawless behavior.
Congressman Chaffetz wants to get rid of the BLM's law enforcement unit.
But the BLM doesn't need its own police force. It's kind of silly.
Bishop, Stewart, Love support the proposal to pay county sheriffs to patrol public lands.
They know the people. They're locally elected. They can bring down the blood pressure a lot more.
Hallelujah.
Thornton says hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Now for his next move, convince the state of Utah to approve a petition to fund a 2,000-person militia that can take a stand against the feds.
Should the people of Utah be afraid of somebody like
Absolutely not, because we are there for them. We are there for their God-given constitutional rights.
I called Thornton tonight. He's still in Portland, and he says today's acquittal of the 7 defendants in Oregon validates their theories about the Constitution, that the federal government cannot control public lands. He told me there is now a massive momentum going forward to stand up to the feds over land rights. But on the other side of this, there's concern that today's verdict gives these groups permission to stage armed takeovers based on their theories and their beliefs and not face any criminal consequences, Mike.
So what do they want to